Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, a homeowner association fined me for parking semi-trucks on my factory industrial property despite me not being a member of the HOA. They insist that I'm devaluing the neighborhood and ended up vandalizing my trucks. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the story. The first one starts like this. I'm just your average Southeast Asian guy running a small factory business with a handful of semi-trucks, 5 to be exact. I know that might not sound like much compared to those mega factories you see out there, but for a regular individual like me, it's a pretty big deal. I've got a bunch of workers who depend on those trucks to keep our business rolling. Another thing I'm part of is my lovely neighborhood, a peaceful and serene place which I've called home for almost a decade. Life was all sunshine and rainbows, though all that took a 180-degree turn when the Homeowner Association, or HOA for short, came into the picture. I'll be honest, I still have not figured out why on earth they decided to set up this HOA thing. I asked a few of my neighbors and they were just as puzzled as me as to why we needed an HOA. But it was here, whether we liked it or not, and you had the choice to either be a part of it or stay out of it. Since I found no use for the HOA in the first place, I decided to not be a part of it in any manner whatsoever. I mean, seriously, I could not see any point in getting involved with the HOA. It felt like they were trying to fix something that was not broken in the first place. Even though I had nothing to do with the HOA, their president decided to drop a bombshell on me. He slapped me with a whopping $100 daily fine for each truck, totaling to around $500, claiming that my semi-trucks were single-handedly polluting the pristine environment of our neighborhood and causing noise pollution as well. According to him, my trucks were dragging down the property values and he could not have that. This was not the first time the HOA had fined someone for the worst of reasons. They had a knack for pulling these shenanigans on anyone they pleased. One of our younger neighbors had the audacity to paint her mailbox a slightly different shade of blue. You would think it was a major crime the way they fined her for altering the neighborhood aesthetics. Another neighbor who planted some sunflowers in his front yard to brighten things up a bit was told he was ruining the landscape by being excessive with vegetation. The neighbor across from my own property parked their RV in their driveway for a couple of weeks after their vacation and got fined by the HOA claiming that it was an eyesore. Honestly, you would not believe the length the HOA went to when it came to dishing out these fines. It was like they had a never-ending well of creativity for finding reasons to empty our wallets. And also, they did not care who they were scamming money out of. We had a nice elderly couple in the neighborhood who had a sweet tooth for bird watching. And well, they put up a quaint bird feeder in their backyard to attract some feathered friends. The HOA president was not too pleased with this and claimed that the bird feeder was attracting vermin. The couple were hit with hefty fines and soon enough they had to take down their beloved bird feeder, much to the dismay of the whole neighborhood. A kid who was barely 12 years old decided to set up a lemonade stand on a hot summer day, and hours later the HOA member came to visit his parents and insisted that the stand was causing unauthorized commercial activity and slapped them with a fine as well. And when these HOA freaks would run out of stupid reasons, they would say that the fine was in the name of protecting the environment. Which was not only illegal in some ways, but it was also extremely hypocritical of the president who drives around in a gas-guzzling SUV that could probably rival a small tank. It was the kind of vehicle that left a trail of smog behind it, but the HOA saw no problem with that. They never saw any problem when it came to their president, which made me suspicious if this man had set up this whole association to simply scam people out of money and get away with his actions. Because while the HOA was legally set up, unfortunately, the president would often do things like throwing leaves in another person's property and then trying to fine them for not keeping their property clean. Thankfully, that person lashed out by showing a footage of the president himself throwing the leaves, and the HOA quickly dropped the case. And if that did not prove how much of a hypocrite this man was, last year he decided to put up a massive neon Christmas display on his front lawn that could probably be seen from space. It consumed enough electricity to power a small town, and he justified it as spreading holiday cheer. Meanwhile, he fined another resident for having a couple of solar panels on their roof, calling them a destruction of natural beauty. It was like the HOA and their president had a checklist of ways to make sure your life is miserable and your wallet will become lighter. And as for my situation, well, it was clear they were just out to grab some extra cash using any excuse they could find. So coming back to me being fined for my semi-trucks, since I'm not part of this HOA, I naturally thought I had no need to care for any of this. Well, the HOA president did not like my silence and decided to take matters into his own hands. I was off doing my usual business when, out of nowhere, a squad of what I can only describe as thugs descended on my factory property. I was not around at the time, but by the time I reached the factory, the damage was already done. Thankfully, I had some guards on the premises and they managed to stop most of these goons in their tracks. However, they were outnumbered and these thugs had already vandalized 3 out of my 5 semi-trucks. I immediately picked up my phone and dialed up the HOA president, making sure to record the entire conversation. When he picked up, I demanded an explanation for this outrageous act. This jerk of a human had the audacity to justify his actions by claiming that I had forced his hands in vandalizing my trucks because I was not listening to him. That this break-in, a highly illegal act, was my fault and a punishment for me not paying the stupid HOA fines. He even had the nerve to threaten me further, saying that he could bring in a whole army if he wanted to. He told me I should be thanking my lucky stars that I was not at the factory, or he would have given me a makeover in red and blue as well, just like my semi-trucks. I cursed at him and dropped the call before going to my factory security room and retrieved a copy of the footage that clearly showed the HOA president and his gang breaking into my property as if they were not afraid of laws and could do whatever they want. I decided it was best to send my workers home for the day and advised the security guards to stay on high alert. Then I drove off to the nearest police station, evidence in hand. There I filed a comprehensive report against the HOA president explaining my side of the story while presenting the footage and the recording as evidence. Both of my evidence left no doubt in the matter, but as per the protocol, the police summoned the HOA president to the station to give his side of the story too. He walked in like he owned the place with his lawyer by his side and tried to BS his way out of it by saying how they were just trying to protect the environment. As I had predicted, the case eventually found its way into the courts where things started to get real interesting. The HOA president, once smug as can be, quickly shifted to a more annoyed mood as my lawyer presented a rock-solid case against him. He had dealt with people like the HOA president before, and he was not about to let this guy get off the hook. Unlike the HOA and its president, we had the evidence and the witnesses, both of which testified against him and the association. In the end, the court handed down a verdict and the HOA president found himself behind bars. He was also slapped with a hefty $120,000 fine for the damages caused, and soon enough the whole HOA had disbanded as well. And here, Ripe Stars, that's exactly where HOA presidents, at least the corrupt ones, should end up. Good for OP, and I hope he will never be bothered again by an HOA. Either way, if you enjoyed the story, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And by the way, if you cannot get enough of my content, then please also check out my podcast by searching for Ripestories on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple, and Google. Either way, the next one is titled Pay Your Employees, posted by user Infinite Emotions on r/Ripestories. So, first of all, everyone in this tale is dead. The oldest died last week, and I hate the idea that this may be forgotten because no one is talking about it anymore. Also, this is a great story that deserves to be shared. Names will be changed so I don't accidentally dox myself. This took place back in the early 1940s. There was a man, let's call him Martin. Martin was an orchard owner and had 7 orchards. Naturally, Martin had to hire several sharecroppers. Martin was also a capitalist jerk who managed to arrange to pay his sharecroppers. And by the way, sharecroppers being people who were hired to help work the fields and with bringing in harvest in such a way that they ended up owing him money. First, he paid them very little. Second, part of their contract meant that they had to buy their supplies and groceries from his own little store, which sold things at a steep markup. He also graciously allowed his sharecroppers to open lines of credit so that they could get enough supplies and groceries to live, even though he was not paying them enough to survive. So now it's time to introduce the hero of the story. We will call him George. George was both a sharecropper and a landowner, which made him an outlier and gave him more freedom than other sharecroppers. Sources vary on how he got the land. Some say that it was originally George's wife, that George was a successful thief and had used money he had stolen to buy the land. Also that George was a retired army general, etc., but he had the land. He also, for whatever reason, did not have enough money to start his own farm or orchard, which he wanted to do. So he decided to hire himself out as a sharecropper, and the person hiring at that time was Martin. George had several advantages over the other sharecroppers that Martin hired. Number 1, he had his own land, which meant he didn't need to rent from Martin, who upcharged the rent the same way he did for the supplies and food. Number 2, he was either a native or knew someone native, which meant the majority of his food came from his own land and not the super expensive store. 3. George was educated and could do the math to know how much he was owed. At the end of the season, Martin was handing out his slips informing the sharecroppers that they owed him money. He would graciously allow them to squat for a fee that was added to their ledger between seasons. But George did not owe anything. In fact, Martin owed George. So Martin had George arrested on charges of theft and escorted off the land. George did not take kindly to this, not at all, and decided that since he's already labeled a thief by Martin, who was arguably a thief himself, he was gonna get his pay no matter how he had to do that. So he spent his jail time plotting. The next year Martin was getting a very special shipment. He was getting peaches. This was important because the rest of his orchards were for local trees. No, I'm not gonna say what they were, anonymity, but the peaches were to be imported. And more importantly, they were being imported from China. Martin had purchased and paid to ship 5 healthy peach tree saplings. Then George got released from jail around the same time that the trees arrived, and George knew the land. Everyone knew about the trees because Martin was a braggart in addition to his other sins. So George sneaked on Martin's land, stole the peach trees and took them to his own land. Remember when I mentioned that George was native enough to know what grows locally? Well, he found the perfect place to plant the saplings, in a little grove clearing where he could, once the dirt settled, reliably claim to have found them. So then George, not Martin, started the first local peach orchard. Martin tried to have George arrested for stealing the peach trees, but George was able to point out the location, how the saplings were growing, and said that they were naturally his as they were already on his land. And Martin had to watch as George started, ran and worked his own peach orchard. Also, George took in sharecroppers that he actually paid, so they built a town around his orchard, which is still here today. By contrast, Martin's orchards were split upon his death because he died without an heir, and the state sold his assets to pay for his funeral. Just wanted to share this epic story so that it is not lost to the annals of time. ETA, I don't know how I forgot to mention the dogs, but I did. See, Martin was not a total idiot and had dogs guarding the saplings. Unfortunately, he was the kind of evil that believed a starving dog was the best guard dog. So George took steaks with him and fed the dogs. Sources vary on the number of steaks and dogs. Lowest end says 3, highest is 15, real answer is probably somewhere between the two. And the dogs went with George, meaning that he got both Martin's peach trees and Martin's dogs. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing this story. And Ripestars, if you have any stories of your own to share, then please head on over to r/Ripestories on Reddit, where you can post your own stories, and there's a good chance I will read them in a video. Anyway, the next one is an Am I the A-hole story. Am I the a-hole for banning my coworker? So I, male 44, have 3 sons. This concerns the oldest, Faisal, male 15. Faisal is medium functioning autistic. He processes things in a different way and cannot stand if his room has a very different smell, for example. I clean his room in the same way every time as to avoid any divergence. Faisal dislikes all animals except for cats and bugs, and the smell and noise plays a big part on this dislike. So when I let my coworker John, male 50, safekeep my place while me and my boys were out of town, I told him that absolutely no pets except for cats were allowed inside Faisal's room under any circumstances. When we came back, Faisal's room stank of wet dog. We had a huge meltdown, and even after I finished cleaning it, he still spent all night scrubbing the floors with his hands so roughly they wounded. My mates at the company I work at organize a dinner at someone's house every month, and this month was my turn. When John asked me what the food would be, I told him he was not welcome for breaking that important rule in front of everyone in the room, and that he could forget any future event regarding my house or my family. John said it was not his fault for my son's reaction and that he could not take the rule seriously when it made an exception of one species of animal. I told my sister and she said I overreacted and that Faisal should cope with change. So Reddit, am I the a-hole for this prohibition? And yeah, Ripestars, let me know in the comments what you think about this. Do you think OP was the a-hole here or not? Either way, a comment said, not the a-hole, John sucks as a person for doing whatever he wanted with your house while you were not there to protect it. Good on you for maintaining boundaries. Comment number 2, very not the a-hole, your son has a straight up medical issue and this dude effed with that. Nope, nope, nope. And yeah, Ripestars, I would agree with the commenters here, this co-worker clearly did not give a damn about OP or his son and completely disregarded the medical issues of OP's son. Therefore, OP is definitely not the a-hole. Either way, the next one is titled, I insulted my sister and I'm happy about it. I, female 26, have 3 older siblings. This is about my older sister Abby, female 37. Abby has a son, 5 years old, and I have a daughter, 1 year old. Abby dealt with years of fertility issues and had probably 10 miscarriages. Then she had her son, and of course he was Abby's miracle rainbow boy. We were so happy for her. But then this led to Abby spoiling her son and letting him get away with everything because he is a miracle and he is special. Everyone has always bit their tongue when it comes to her son because of that. On Saturday, I had my daughter's first birthday party. It was mostly family and a few of my close friends were invited. I invited Abby and her son because everyone else in our family was invited and I felt bad for excluding her. We had different activities for the kids to do. Abby's son did not like any of them. He was upset that none of the presents were for him. He did not want to eat any of the food that we had. He then decided to try and push the cake off the table because apparently he was mad that the cake was not his. I got super upset at Abby for allowing her son to act that way. She went on to say that her son is special, and I said her son is only special to her, which is understandable, but to everyone else he's a spoiled brat, which should not be overlooked because he was your special miracle baby. Abby called me a bitch and left crying. A few family members have since called me an a-hole because I've never dealt with a miscarriage, so I don't understand how painful it was for Abby to deal with years of that before her son. It's not that I don't realize her son is special to her, but it doesn't give the excuse for Abby to allow him to act like a spoiled brat. And yeah, Ripestars, let me know what you think about this in the comments. Do you think OP is being the a-hole here or not? Let me know. Comment number 1 from Reddit said, not the a-hole, and you are 100% correct. While he is her miracle baby, no one else in the world is gonna coddle him except her, and she is raising him to be a spoiled entitled brat, which will only bring him issues later in life. He needs some manners and discipline, and your sister needs a wake-up call. What is she gonna say to the police when he gets arrested for his bad behavior? But officer, he is my miracle baby. He didn't mean to steal and assault someone, whatever stupid thing he did, because he thinks he can get away with it. It's better she realizes this now than when he is older and there are real-life consequences to his actions. Comment number 2, not the a-hole, being a rainbow baby is not an excuse to be terrible. Your sister is neglecting parenting her child because of the difficulty in having him. That's a road to disaster. A strong wake-up call was needed. Comment number 3, not the a-hole, and tell the flying monkeys that your sister is actively harming her child by not preparing him for living with others in the same society. The kid will go to school soon and it will be really hard for the kid if the mom does not get her head out of her ass. Edit, sorry for shouting and lecturing, but parents like that hit a nerve. Eventually, this rainbow baby thing will be clarified as child abuse, at least I hope so. And the next one is titled, New coworker does not want help, okay. Hello all, back again with more chaos. I guess it does not surprise anyone now that I worked in healthcare, so let's get onto another healthcare job post. Note, this story is old, I've not worked at this place for years, also this is not the same job as my post about helping my coworkers. Story time. I worked in a pharmacy dedicated to sending medications to nursing homes. Since this is often difficult to do just by hand, there were machines that could help out. I often helped use the machines to package the meds. A new coworker joined my team. She was pleasant enough, but for some reason I could not tell you, even to this day I hated her on sight. Apparently the feeling was mutual, though we were able to work together cordially enough. Since the machines, while super useful, were also prone to breaking down, a lot of manual intervention was required to ensure smooth operation. Since it is a pharmacy, we also had to keep track of the medications being used on it, which means counts often done nightly, particularly with more expensive medications. This information is relevant. I had been at this job for a few years, so was reasonably experienced with the use and maintenance of the machines. Coworker wasn't. This is also where I point out that coworker is older than me. So, coworker had been at the job a few weeks and had received some training, so my boss at the time, I've written a post about that creature elsewhere, told me that I would be okay for her to shadow me while I worked, but also to make sure she did some of the work on her own so she would learn via hands-on experience. This also meant I could not leave until the coworker did, since she hadn't been given the go-ahead to be alone with the machine. Goody. It went more or less okay for the majority of the shift. I let coworker do some of the work as ordered by my supervisor, and she seemed to be getting it. However, for some reason she was not relying on the computer, which had kept track of all the medications used and their corresponding slots, to do the nightly count. Instead, she was literally writing down every single slot and medication by hand to count later. Coworker, I said, you know the computer keeps track of that?
I know it does, OP, but I don't seem to get how to do it.
This is toward the end of the shift, and my nerves were fried from having to deal with her, and I was tired. You do it like this, coworker, shows her.
I don't get it, OP, so I'm just going to do it by hand. You younger people don't seem to have a problem with computers, but I do. Let me do it by myself.
People. The process to see what had been used was literally 2 clicks of a mouse button. I had shown her once at the start of our shift, and our supervisor had shown her during initial training. Another coworker had shown her while she was training. I was done. So I let her do exactly what she wanted, let her write down every canister by hand, every medicine by hand, and let her count by hand. I even offered as a show of good faith to help with the counting, but again,
no, OP, I will do it. Let me do it by myself.
Fine. As a result, we ended up leaving an hour after our shifts were supposed to end. That is an hour of OT that we hadn't been authorized to take, for the record. Next day, my supervisor asks me why I had stayed so late last night. So I told her very honestly that coworker did not want my help finishing out the necessary counts last night. Supervisor, being what she was, yes, my wording here is deliberate, immediately went and ripped coworker a new one. The day after, coworker did not come in. We all found out she had quit, effective immediately. Good riddance, I guess. Bonus aftermath, I also found out the day after I had to stay so late that the counts coworker did. They were wrong, all of them. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.